OK, so how worried are you about the cost of living crisis? How worried are you about the fact that the winter fuel payment has disappeared and that taxes are rising and that the Labour government seem determined to make this the worst ever budget? Well, Phillip Ullman is a social entrepreneur and he's incredibly worried about it. Just a reminder, Phillip built an enormous company, 100,000 employees, £1 billion turnover, but decided that the morality of all of this outsourcing was not a great thing. Phillip, the winter fuel payment has been in for quite some time. It's now been abolished for people who earn over £11,000 who are pensioners. How much damage is that going to do?
Well, to put it simply, it's going to kill. If you've got people on £11,000 a year who will not be able to heat their houses up, they'll sit in the cold. The cost of fuel over the last couple of years has grown, and we're taking away £300 from the poorest. It has to be murder. I can't see any other way of describing it.
How many do we think it's going to kill? Because we've, I mean, you quote the...
Yeah, I mean, it's about 30,000 as excess deaths in winter anyway, because they do it in thirds. So, and it will, you know, £200 is a lot to older people, isn't it? They'll visually, even if they could afford it, they'll think, oh, psychologically, they won't turn it on and there'll be death just because of that, won't they?
How can they sleep at night? And how can they...
Well, they get their energy paid, don't they, by us? You know,
and where's the money going? The energy costs have increased. It's gone into the profits of these companies that don't need any more money. It's been distributed to people with wealth. It's taken away from the very poorest. And it's killing it. It's nothing short of obscene.
One of the things that worries me is that we've built up all of these government bureaucracies. I always say this, so when I went to school and I studied my A-levels, they talked about, in French society, there's the bureaucracy. Well, we now have that blob, that bureaucracy. And I just feel like taxes are rising in order to pay for these people to make life more difficult. Perhaps you can tell me a little bit about not just poverty, which I know you can talk about, but also what's it like to run a business with all these bureaucrats breathing down your neck?
Well, it's crazy. I'm thinking back to over the kind of 20, 25 years I was in business. I reckon between 90 and 95% of my time was spent dealing with ridiculous bureaucracy.
But what was it when you started? Was it like 20% and then it sort of gradually...
Yeah, it gradually got worse and worse.
Snowballed.
We all know that teachers, how much time are they spending on bureaucratic form filling?
Police.
Doctors. Police. Everybody is spending loads and loads of time on meaningless paper pushing, which means their jobs are boring, they can't do the real work. Teachers hate it, doctors hate it, and
well,
it's actually making jobs...
I'll tell you a story that I found, which was this. When I worked for Windsor and Maidenhead Council, I spoke to the trade union, and they gave us a load of people who were... social workers. Social workers get bashed, but they're actually good people, right? And they said, we can't do a 10-minute meeting with a troubled family because the computer system that was brought in by Tony Blair means we have to spend 4 hours filling out forms. So if we don't have 4 hours and 10 minutes, then what we have to do is leave the family without that support. And that goes right across the board.
Well, it means that there's so much regulation, there's so many laws which grow and grow and grow, which means the law doesn't protect the people that it's designed to protect. In fact, the large companies can afford to spend money on an administrator because they've got big turnover.
Isn't that why they're doing it? It's the corporatism. It's good for the corporates, and that's who they ultimately work for.
And it means the wealthy get wealthier, and the poor people die.
Well, you used to see it when I worked in the European Parliament. I worked everywhere. When I worked in the European Parliament, you used to see it, where big companies would come in and they'd go, we want to make regulation better. It's going to be a bit expensive. It's going to cost 100,000 a year to put this regulation in. What they never told those idiots in the European Parliament is if you've got 1,000 employees, 100 grand a year extra isn't a thing. If you've got 4, you're going to go bankrupt. And time again, these regulations existed in order to destroy people.
I was involved in an industry where you paid low-paid people, and there were working time regulations that came from Europe. It was farcical because the regulations that were drafted in Europe didn't work. They didn't sit well with the UK legislation, and they simply didn't work, and there were mistakes in the way it was implemented. which meant that the whole industry was working with mistakes. It's farcical, it's crazy, and it wastes huge amounts of money.
Messes up the economies. Countries where they have all these, or you know, it really messes up. Like in France, look what happened in Greece, where it eventually imploded, didn't they? Had to take people's bank accounts basically. So this is the more regulation you have.
If we want people to have meaningful employment, they have to do things that actually impact on other people, that enable people to care for other people, to meet other people's needs. If all you're doing is filling in forms that are meaningless, it means that people's lives are actually meaningless.
Absolutely. Let me just leave it there just for 1 second, because this issue of cost of living, this issue of winter fuel payments was a big thing, and Rishi Sunak questioned Labour at PMQs.
So can he tell the House, very specifically to the pensioners that are watching, how much less support a pensioner on £13,000 will receive this winter?
No Prime Minister wants to do what we have to do in relation to the winter fuel allowance, but we have to take the tough decision to stabilise our economy to ensure that we can grow it for the future. And as I've said, we are working hard on pension credit. We're allowing housing benefits, which they didn't do for years, and over 5 years, it's projected an increase of up to £1,000 for those on pensions. We are tough decisions that they done.
This hole in public finance, I don't understand how half of this country's entire income can be spent on the public sector, and these lot are still saying they don't have enough.
Absolutely crazy. What we have to do is shrink the state. Money should be spent by people in their local communities to meet the needs of neighbours, family and friends, and then are accountable to the local community. As soon as you take it away from people, give it to a state bureaucracy, you lose accountability, you waste huge amounts. We all know nationalisation of industry simply doesn't work. And we're getting a bigger and bigger burden of taxation. And it's absolutely ludicrous. And they're just almost an autopilot. They're not thinking about it.
And people are leaving, entrepreneurs are leaving. There is already a lot of people.
What upsets me, I know it's kind of a little bit off topic, but I used to watch, once again, when I was in local government, you know, the Children's Services Department, sorry, the Youth Service. The Youth Service would work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, right? And you think, well, why are you not working evenings and weekends? We never gave any money to the Scouts or the Boys Brigade or anything like that, or the Girl Guides. We were constantly obsessed with just bringing this into government and never giving anything to the community.
Absolutely. And therefore, the whole focus on all the stuff that Labour's doing, more and more quangos, more and more regulators, is balmy. It's balmy. It's creating more and more regulation, more and more centralisation. The state is big enough as it is. It's just going to grow, and the system is
and we don't have local communities like we used to, do we? And it would be good to bring local communities back.
Well, I think we've destroyed them. I think the little, you know, the little fella that would organise the club football team or whatever, all those people.
And the local copper lived and knew all the dodgy people.
The regulation is too complicated. And people give up. They say, "Mum, I can't cope with it." With
you
all
can't
this
be bothered as well. If you tax at 50%, then you're also going to be taxed on VAT, so you're going to lose over half your income.
The other thing is, and there's something that you've talked about on your YouTube channel, and by the way, Philip's YouTube channel is The Manna Journey, and also he writes for The Telegraph. But you've talked about this loads of times, this idea that when you centralise everything within government, what you push out is the opportunity of just a dad volunteering to have a kick around on a Saturday, or maybe somebody becoming a Boys Brigade leader, or somebody going to the local church or mosque or synagogue to help out. All of that disappears. It just becomes government.
Everything becomes centralised, depersonalised, dehumanised. Everybody becomes a cog in a machine, rather than a living person in a living
very 1984.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're heading relentlessly in a dangerous direction. And that's why we're having the riots. That's why we're having people say, "1 minute, I'm left behind. The jobs have gone to China. I'm on benefits. I'm stuck. There are not enough manufacturing jobs. There are not enough real jobs, and people are upset."
I know this is a difficult question for anyone to answer. But you've gone from being an engineer, you've gone from trying to run a wire company to doing outsourcing, whatever. How have we ended up in this situation whereby so many people are in poverty, where there's so much fuel poverty, where people don't feel they're part of a community? I've often said, I'm a Catholic and you're Jewish. I feel that we do benefit from community in a way that perhaps many people watching and listening don't feel that they do. But how can we how have we ended up in this position, and how can we change it?
Look, if we allow businesses to look after one group, which is purely the shareholders, and make them more and more wealthy, and forget about people, community, families, the actual environment, this will never stop, because we're allowing them to make more and more and more money, which more and more goes to the top. The people in the families and communities are left behind. Jobs go. People are facing inflation and increases in interest rates. Until we actually get people aligned and say we are all responsible for looking after each other. But
that changed in the 80s when it was all look after number one, you've got to watch yourself, and this is where it's all started, isn't it, really?
It happened.
People blame Thatcher, but Thatcher actually made people develop, buy houses and start businesses.
But actually there's two sides to it, isn't there? Philip will talk, obviously, about the shareholders and business only being interested in profit. But the problem is the public sector is only interested in public sector employees.
Correct.
And so we've got two sides of this who are both selfish.
Oh, absolutely right. And what we need to do is align the public sector and the private sector to look after people, to look after family, communities, to look after the environment, and to align. They're fighting each other as well. Everybody's fighting everyone else. It's winner takes all. But
the public sector is now the elite, isn't it? I mean, it used to be you got less than the prop. Now you get a lot more as wages.
It's crazy. They massively increase the price. Yeah. Of course, that is these people not producing any stuff, which is increasing the cost, which is increasing taxation, which is increasing prices.
But they're in control. What's not to like for them? So why would it end with? They're just going to want to carry it on, aren't they?
It ends because the system is building up huge amounts of debt.
People have had enough.
People have had enough, and people can't afford to put food on the table, and they're going without meals, and now with the fuel change, people
but they don't seem to care.
Not be able to heat themselves.
But they don't care. They'll lock you up if you complain now.
I had this argument with people. You know, when I was doing this project in Windsor, and people were going, "Oh, what are we going to do about Alexandra Gardens? Oh, it needs to be planted. I said, let's just turn up with a spade. Right? And do you know what? That seemed sensible to me. But what was the answer? Well, have you got your public liability insurance? Have you asked permission?
You get arrested for that now.
For God's sake.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I had a friend who went out and somebody complained about his local letterbox being damaged. And do you know what? He got some red paint, turned up and painted it. The post office went mad because he wasn't properly insured. But we're not able to take control of our communities, Philip.
No, we have to rebuild. And the family is disintegrated, the community is disintegrated, and the nation's disintegrated. We led the way in the Industrial Revolution. We got world-class people that can think for themselves. We have to distribute responsibility to get people excited about the country, excited about a future where we bring back manufacturing, start to show how classy we are in this area, and then we can start to rebuild a system that looks after various areas, and we don't end up with people without jobs and benefits.
But I watched you know, this thing about Grenfell Tower, which is absolutely horrendous. And what they said that there were all these bureaucracies, there were all these quangos, there were all these bodies, there were building regulators, there were fire officers, there were local councils, and they had all completely passed paperwork from person to person and done nothing. But then what upset me was the end of it was, I know what we need to do. Let's set up another quango. Let's have another one within this
investigation
of failure.
And delay the criminal investigation.
The more law you get, the more complex you get, the less people are protected, the more people are going to die, the more mistakes they're going to make. You have to get rid of the regulation. As I always say, if it's too complicated and a simple person can't understand
they do that on purpose. They do that on purpose. They did it with Hillsborough. They do it for 35 years. They do it so the people are dead by the time, the ones who were to blame. Absolutely. And eventually that's what will happen.
I mean, I just find it incredibly frustrating that you can have a report on Hillsborough, which on Grenfell, but Hillsborough's the same actually. Where they have actually done a fulsome investigation, it is now sensible, and they say all of this is dreadful, all of these
always
people,
cover-ups.
Nobody's responsible. The reason that he doesn't know what's going on is because he got past the paper and they got past the paper. But I'll tell you what we'll do, let's have another body creating paper to just...
Lessons will be learned. And
crazy, they don't know the lessons.
Yeah.
How do we simplify things, Philip?
Look, we have to revisit the whole system, the whole of Parliament. We watch Rishi and Keir they're punching each other. It's like bashing each other with their head. This is the.
But that's our parliament. That's our
parliament.
But our parliament's designed to be combative.
Childish combat. Winner takes all.
It's designed for that, though. Our parliament.
No, it's
just swords with it. It's not like a curved parliament.
So we're having a budget. There'll be thousands of pages of legislation that no one understands. That will allow the wealthy people to avoid paying taxes, and the people who need to be protected will not be protected, and it's going to get worse and worse.
But hang on a second, right? So. You're somebody who went to Cambridge to study engineering, right? I'm not going to be crass, but you had a company with £1 billion turnover. So you are one of the 1%, easily one of the 1%. You're also you're a chartered accountant. What worries me is when you come here and say nobody understands the budget, right? Yes. I think you've got the credibility as a graduate from Cambridge, who's an accountant, who's been associated with so much money. You've got credibility in this space.
Nobody will understand a word of what Rachel Reeves is saying. It's so full of bureaucracy. Before you even look at the umpteen press releases and it's a completely crazy situation. We've to scrap the register, start again, look very simply what we're trying to achieve, and forget about these truckloads of legislation no one understands.
They like it complicated, because I had mates who were brokers in the city in the 80s, and they were all like, they were hardly literate. They were all drunk all the time. And then I had mates in the 90s and 2000. They were all Cambridge maths graduates, and this is how we ended up with the 2008 crash, because they did all these crazy packages with crap mortgages in, and it all clapped because no one understood it.
No one understands
apart from the very top, and that's how they did it.
And that's until we start to simplify, to educate rather than regulate. We're going to have more and more disasters, more and more suffering, more and more pain, more and more death. We have to
I want to explore this educate, not regulate thing, because I've heard you say it in other places. Your idea is that we need people to better understand how to live their lives successfully. We need to build communities, we need to build families, rather than saying you must do this, you must live like that, you must do whatever. I mean, that to me is right, because I will tell you the biggest provider of social security in Britain are dads and mums to their own children, and yet we're attempting to move away from that.
Absolutely, as you mentioned earlier. The system fails, so we need another regulator who's trying to force people to behave in a certain way. The way to get people to start taking responsibility for themselves is to educate them, to understand how to live a healthy life, how to care for the family, how to start finding meaningful work which actually cares for other people. And education is what we need to do, and we're not. Education is mutual. It's about working together, collaboration, whereas regulation is that what you need to do is force people, more bureaucracy, more hierarchy, more top-down command and control, which is the opposite of what you need.
Okay, I'm going to apologise to everyone. Philip is staying with us till 11, but I forgot to go to the break, so let's do that right now. OK, so this is The Late Show with Andre Walker and Asher Gould, and we're still here with social entrepreneur and business leader and thought leader, Phillip Ullman. But before we talk to Philip about his predictions for the immediate future, which might be a little bit depressing, if I'm being honest, we'll go to the voice notes. Michael is the first one.
In my employment, I have been gaslit that there's underrepresented groups, which is just simply not the case. In most places where I work now as a contractor, the majority of people in all these workplaces are not white. And it's just absolutely absurd to say that there's underrepresentation. And I think somebody, maybe Reform, could start to do some research into this, because this gaslighting needs to stop.
Well, I have to say, if what you're going to do is go for quotas, then you have to start saying that in certain industries there is an overrepresentation of black and minority ethnic people. I don't believe in quotas, but if we're going to do quotas in some businesses, we have to do them in all of them. Robbie's next.
Hi, Andre. Hi, Ash. Robbie from Dublin here again. I was just wondering, when Starmer came out and called all the white working class people far-right thugs when they were out protesting about the immigrants, the good idea would be to get a group together, call yourselves Labour voters against illegal immigration, go on these marches and protests and see what he has to say about them then, and see how the police treat them even better.
Now, I know you're extremely upset about the treatment of people who are worried about the cost of living crisis, but we don't really have a massive amount of time for that. Let's do that at some point in the future. Look, I know you're not a mind reader, nor do you have a crystal ball, but how worried are you about the budget coming up?
My chief concern is I don't think the typical working class person is actually going to be interested in the budget, because They don't. It's too complicated. It's where they are concerned about putting food on the table. They're concerned.
Well, how will
about,
it affect them on that? The budget. Say someone earning 20 to 30 grand.
If you're a pensioner, you're going to start losing £300 a year and risk living in a cold home and dying as a result of the budget, which is going to, of course, fill them with pleasure.
Angela Rayner has also not ruled out the getting rid of the 25% council tax discount for single people, so widows can add another £300-400 taken off them to their bill if that comes in.
They're not recognising the crisis that people are facing. Cost of living, food has increased, as we all know, over the last 2 years. The mortgages and inflation is crazy. So what they do, they impose on top of the inflation interest rate hikes, which means people are being hit left, right, and centre. Now they've been taken their fuel allowance. People are despairing.
That causes inflation.
And what's happening is they're not listening. The Chancellor Reeves, and they're not listening to people. There's a disconnect, and people are angry, justifiably angry.
I can't understand. I can't understand how, even if you're mortgage free as a pensioner, you've got £11,000 a year coming in. You're paying £2,000 a year for your heating bill, and you need to, you know, ordinary food, simple stuff like peppers or cucumbers or onions or whatever it is, they've all gone up by 20, 30, 40%. I can't understand how you're surviving.
No, nor can I. I mean, you're earning less than a minimum wage worker working 35, 40 hours, and you're having to lose £300, which means you can't heat your home. I mean, how they could possibly...
They've called in and they're having a miserable time.
I don't understand how that could get through. How anybody could be stupid enough to put something like this into... It's absurd. Absurd and obscene.
But is there a part of this, and this is... I don't know if this is a question for you, Philip, or even for you, Asher, but... is there an element of this where, you know, the government wants to make things feel very, very unpleasant in order to say, well, the last guys were awful?
Yeah, but it doesn't work because they are supposed to connect, to listen to people, to keep on blaming everything on...
Pensioners don't vote for Labour, though, and if they kill 30, 40, 50,000 off, that's a lot of pensions saved, that's a lot of NHS bills saved, that's a massive saving. Is it part of their behavioural unit? They just want to kill them off.
You hate to think about it, but if they think about the numbers, we know the NHS doesn't resuscitate people because they need beds, and therefore people are killed because they need beds, therefore they're not going to resuscitate them. Here, they don't get fuel allowance, their houses are cold, they're going to die.
Yeah, but what happened?
And they know that.
And they know it, and it's going to reduce their costs, which is obscene and completely disgraceful.
But Philip, we've only got a minute left with you, and obviously you're coming back to do this co-hosting for the full 2 hours. Why don't we live in a country where people sit back and go, I know the pensioners don't vote for me, but I'm going to do the right thing by them anyway?
Because all they care about is power. Or they want to be in the government. They don't care. They have no mission. They have no ideas. They don't know what they're trying to do.
Starmer changes his mind every 10 minutes.
No, absolutely. He doesn't know what he's trying to achieve. There's no purpose at all. And therefore, they're not looking after anybody. They have no direction. All they want is the power. They're hungry for power. And they've got the power, but they don't know what to do with it.
He had to go at the Tories for saying they might take the winter fuel away. And now he's doing it.
It's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
I just feel like doing the right thing is so unfashionable. But to be fair... you are building your own organisation and corporation to try and do the right thing, so we appreciate you coming on and helping us. That is Phillip Ullman, a social entrepreneur and thought leader, somebody who walked away from a £1 billion company because he felt that outsourcing was immoral and wants to bring back better opportunities for people and indeed more democracy to the country. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Get that number in your phone. You put 0344 499 1000 in, and then you can send us one of those WhatsApp voice messages, which means that in addition to calling, you can also have just your moment when you can't be interrupted by either me or Asher. And God bless you. You might
Twitter as well, at Andre JP Walker, at Virtual...
No, that's not the way it's done. Right, no, you do it.
Andre JP Walker.
At Virtual Ash. There we go. You can see we've been practicing.
TalkTV as well, but they're the most
we've been practicing
really
that. OK, look, we've got Jeremy Dean coming on. He's a KC. He's going to be talking about two-tier.